Hi, my name is Barry. I'm a New York State psychotherapist, and what you're seeing is the post haircut of COVID-19 where I cut it myself. Magnificent, isn't it? Direct competition from Madison Avenue, I'm sure. So, c'est la vie. Okay, so ignore my hair, what I look like, and just listen to my words. So today we're going to be having the next segment on twin flames. I have Zardi here, and he's going to be sharing one of his clinical experiences. And when it's done, I'll tell you some more about me. Okay, here's Zardi. Hello. Well, after that introduction, what can I say? Yes, you look stunning. You're gorgeous. You're so handsome. Ah! All right. So, today, I wish to share one of my experiences with twin flames and basically hope you get something useful out of it. Now, this is not my own personal twin flame, but one of my clients. This was during the Great Depression. I was just starting out, and this was a very affluent couple. He came from oil. She came from, let's just say it's clothing manufacturer for the elite. She did very high-end loungewear, things like that. So, very moneyed couple. Who else could afford to go to counseling in the height of the Depression in 1937? So, this is what happened. This couple were definitely twin flames. However, being true to twin flames, they were irrevocably drawn to each other. Back then, nobody knew anything about twin flames, at least not in the mainstream psychology. So they didn't understand. They had this really disruptive push-pull relationship. Whenever he felt that he was getting himself together, she would run. And then when she was together, he would face challenges. Now, of course, ordinarily under circumstances like this, the couple wouldn't be together. But they really loved each other, and in those days, rich married rich. And both sets of parents were very strongly in favor. So every time one of them started to run, the parents would step in and make sure they made up and got together again. This doesn't really happen much nowadays, but back then society was very different. And this is not atypical in a twin flame relationship. He would do a lot of work on himself. He had a lot of issues, very domineering father, alcoholic mother, and she had the opposite, a very doting father and an absent mother. And I believe her father had numerous affairs, and the mother was just, well, insignificant. She held social parties. Basically, that was her role, to be the hostess. So they didn't have a lot of training from their parents in sharing and in intimacy. And that wasn't really spoken about, particularly in upper class society back then. So they were pretty much on their own, which is how they found me, because I had a reputation already starting as someone who worked effectively with couples, though I didn't have a whole lot at that time, of course. He used to really work on listening to the complaints that she had, and she always had complaints. And he would try to really look at what she was talking about and work through some of the issues that she would bring up. And then eventually, and it wasn't real quick, when he would work it through, she would be so happy and overjoyed. And then he would respond to this openness that she was displaying toward him and want to get closer, particularly on a physical nature. And she'd run. And that's when her parents had to step in and force her to get back together with him. And sometimes when things came up that were just too much for him, he would get really, really angry. He had anger issues. And he would say, "That's it, it's not worth it." And then his parents would step in. And I actually had them for over 5 years, going back and forth. Now, God knows if they ever would have resolved their differences and got married, but they had Zardi, which is what I call myself informally. Yeah, like anyone calls Zardi informally. Anyway, so Zardi stepped in. I call myself Zardi. I think Zardicon is much too formal. So Zardi would step in, and I did a lot of communication work with them. I did a lot of depth work. I helped them get in touch with their feelings, get in touch with their emotions, and more importantly, get in touch with their beliefs. They had, both of them, unfortunately, had very closed second chakras, except to lust. So I had to open them up to caring, feeling, nurturance. Their first chakras were both badly damaged. Their sense of self being just a reflection of their parents. And they had to learn their own identities, that they were not a combination of their mother and father, but rather their own unique individual. He, of course, having a very emotionally disengaged father and an alcoholic mother, really didn't have much to take from either parent. So he was very fragile and really just didn't have a lot of self-confidence at all. She, on the other hand, had a tendency toward being a social butterfly, copying her mother, and trying to smother him, copying her father. So, this poor guy, having a disengaged father and basically an absent mother, is faced with this woman who wants to smother him with affection. He had no idea how to handle it. That was a big part of his learning. And she had to learn that just because her mother was very comfortable playing the social hostess butterfly role does not mean that that's who she is. She could be serious. She could be studious. She could be learned and intellectual. Her father was very smart. In 1937, if you weren't very smart, how else you can make a lot of money? And he made a lot of money. Basically by charging a lot for limited selection that would go to the social elite. And they paid because he established himself as a desirable brand. But she had a tendency when she was with her boyfriend, let's just call him Zach, and she was Grace. Excuse me. When she was with Zach, she would really, excuse me, when she started feeling very secure, she went into the social butterfly role and she started saying, oh, why don't we have a dinner party, and I'll have this and I'll invite so-and-so. And that was the last thing Zach wanted. He hated social engagements because all of his life he was trotted out to be the good boy, dressed well, to politely introduce himself to all the guests, and then to very politely say, I'm going to bed to study Homer, or I'm going to study some of my classical Greek, things like that. And then he would go upstairs and play with his nanny. But he hated social engagements. She, on the other hand, flourished in them, taking after her mother. So you can imagine there were a lot of issues. Now, you're going to ask, what does this have to do with twin flame? A lot. The reason it's relevant is because they were each stimulating each other to deal with what they carry, what they brought into the relationship. Each of them had very deeply embedded patterns that once they became aware of them, they needed to work it through. My role was to help them get in touch with what they carry. He had tremendous amounts of anger. She had tremendous amounts of dependency from her mother. So each of them had to work it through, both separately, and there were times when I strongly recommended that they be officially still dating, but they be emotionally separate from each other. Because when you're in a twin flame relationship, you have to have a degree of separation to work through your own issues. If you're always together, you just can't do it. So they'd be officially together, and they'd even tell their families that they're doing things together. And they might even go and do things together, but only as distant friends, like an acquaintance, not anything intimate. But they did enjoy each other's company, so that wasn't so difficult. And as they continued to work through his anger and tendency to be very distant, she, her tendency to be giddy and social butterfly and the hostess with the mostess, and to be very dependent and be smothering. Oh God, as each started freeing themselves up, you could see a deeper bond forming. Not that a twin flame bond isn't intense, but there was a relaxation in their system. And they were starting to relax with each other. They started getting comfortable. There were some days when they forgot that they each had issues with each other. And they just enjoyed themselves. And I'm proud to say that at the end of 5 years of therapy, this would have been 1942. And the war was raging. Of course, he made a lot of money because there was a huge need for oil, and her father was making tons of money making uniforms for the armed forces. And occasionally, if a rich person was in the army, a couture outfit for the sergeant or the captain. It had to meet regulations, but let's say better quality fabric, better touches of buttons, things like that. Anyway, and they all lived happily ever after. Except, of course, life happens. But that's for another chapter. So, I hope you enjoyed this. And I hope you got a taste of the dynamics of twin flame relationships. Okay. Until the next time, I remain Zardi. And from Jimmy, ciao, baby. I heard that on a commercial once. I don't know what it means. Anyway, bye. Okay, I'm back. So, that was the next installment on Twin Flames. I hope Zardi was helpful. And I'm a New York State licensed psychotherapist. Obviously, I work with couples, individuals. I take insurance if it's out of network and you've met your deductible. Also do a lot of spiritual work, energy healing, belief system release, removal, and I do readings. I like a tabula rasa for that. Just your first name, basically not much else. If you want to contact me, I have a webpage, Birthright Therapy, and you can feel free to write me, Barry at birthrighttherapy.com. Comments, opinions, suggestions, things you desire to hear in the future or don't want to hear in the future. If you want to make an appointment, please feel free. Drop me a note. I love it. And you could also write in the comment section underneath this video. If you find what you're hearing interesting, please do subscribe. And if you want to be notified when the next video is going to be posted, hit that little bell right next to the subscribe, and YouTube will notify you. So, thank you. And until the next time.